pleasure to see you all. I'm just so happy that we're getting back to in person. Thank you. We have an exciting day today, this afternoon, as well as tomorrow evening. So this is considered our pregame, right? And we are happy to have our what we're calling Shatterproofing communities with brave conversations. We have a couple of new projects that we're excited to kind of unveil to you with some of our new partners. My name is, for those of you that don't know me, I think I know everybody here, is Kathleen Moore, and I'm the Executive Director of the Florida Mental Health Institute, as well as Research Professor in our College of Behavioral and Community Sciences. So welcome everyone. And as the Director, I'm honored to co-sponsor This Is My Brave, the College Edition. Our mission aligns really well with the goal of This Is My Brave, which is trying to change the stigma of mental illness by bringing inspiring stories and performers to share and uplift our community. In addition to hearing a little bit more about This Is My Brave, we're also going to have some exciting new research by one of our colleagues, Dr. Margaret McGladrey, who's going to be who's doing some work on Photovoice. Unfortunately, she could not be here this afternoon, so Dr. Kristin Kosyluk will be sharing some of her slides with you about her work on Photovoice. We're also honored to have the Executive Director, Erin Gallagher, here from This Is My Brave. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon and for tomorrow evening. I was reviewing your webpage and love that your vision is to one day live in a world where we don't have to call it brave to talk openly about mental illness. We simply call it talking, and hopefully we will have that in the next few years. We also have another sponsor of This Is My Brave called Shatterproof, here to talk about some of their work on addiction and stigma. We're so happy to have Courtney McKeon, who's the Vice President of Shatterproof's National Stigma Initiative, and Michelle Mangum is the Director of Shatterproof's State Engagement. Thank you both for being here this afternoon. The goals of Shatterproof, and you'll hear more about this from them, are to transform addiction treatment and addiction stigma and educate and empower communities. And then finally, Dean Sorobich is here this afternoon to honor and recognize some of our colleagues. So again, thank you all. So let me now introduce our next speaker, is our own Dr. Kristin Kosyluk, who has been working with This Is My Brave for several years now on an evaluation capacity, and in order to increase the impact and reduce the stigma of mental illness and addiction. With her connection, she was able to bring the college edition of This Is My Brave to USF last year with a resounding success. I think we had about 202 last year, and this year we're up to 301 already. So we should even go up. So we are so excited about this performance tomorrow night. She and her team have been working tirelessly to bring you all a great performance. So I consider her a great friend, colleague. So please give a warm hand to my friend, Dr. Kristin Kosyluk.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. It means a great deal to us. My name is, as Kathy mentioned, is Kristin Kosyluk, and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Mental Health Law and Policy here in the College of Behavioral and Community Sciences. I'll get in a little bit more into how I became involved with This Is My Brave in a bit. But first, I want to kind of set the stage for me to be able to invite Erin to come forward and tell you a little bit about This Is My Brave as an organization. So the title of today's event is Shatterproofing Communities with Brave Conversations. And brave conversations at their core involve storytelling. So that is what if I can advance the slides, there we go. That is what we're really here to talk about today, storytelling as a tool for change. And in this case, we're talking about stigma change. So I was thinking about stories and their meaning to me. And, I know that there's been some books by Dr. Seuss that have some questionable content that we need to be aware of. This one, though, I think is a good example of communicating about differences and othering and stigma. Is anybody familiar with the Sneetches? Yeah. So the star belly Sneetches have bellies on theirs. Well, I don't have it memorized, but there's other Sneetches that have none upon theirs. And these stars are deemed to be a class divider. And so Sylvester McMonkey McBean comes in with his star on and off machine. And he markets this to the Sneetches with no stars on their bellies. who then are the same as the other star belly Sneetches, and he makes a lot of money doing this. And then the Sneetches that are now used to be the only ones with stars on their bellies, pay Sylvester McMonkey McBean to go through and get their stars off. And the moral at the end of the story is, you know, people are capitalizing on our desire to separate ourselves from others and to have that kind of hierarchy. Another story for me that really inspired me to get into the work that I do, this was actually introduced to me in a women's studies class in undergraduate. And this is actually a sequel. You can see it's If These Walls Could Talk 2. The first If These Walls Could Talk was a series about abortion rights. This one was about the rights of lesbian couples. And the story that really spoke to me was about an older lesbian couple who had lived together, but back in the 50s, their marriage was not recognized, or their union was not recognized. And then unfortunately, one of them is hospitalized and eventually ends up passing. And it's about how their partner was not allowed to be with them or to continue living in their home or any of that. And so this, of course, is an example of stigma and discrimination. And we're here tonight, or today, this afternoon, I'll say tonight, tomorrow night. We're here this afternoon to talk about storytelling for mental illness and addiction. And for social change. So one model of storytelling for social change is called entertainment education. And I was introduced to this through a mentor of mine, Arvind Singhal, who's at the University of Texas at El Paso and happens to be one of the authors of the book on this model. And basically what entertainment education is, or edutainment, is intentionally placing educational content in entertaining programming. So I believe that part of what sets This Is My Brave aside as a stigma intervention is that we're entertained when we're receiving this messaging. If you're able to make it tomorrow night, if you were able to make it to last year's show, you know that these storytellers take the stage and share their journey of both their struggles with their mental illness and addiction, but also their recovery journey and their message of hope using creative expression. This theory of change is also incorporates social cognitive theory. So you might remember the Bobo doll experiment, Albert Bandura, these kids watching others beating up this Bobo doll, and they repeat that behavior. Well, I like to kind of think of This Is My Brave in the same way. We have, you heard, over 301 people registered to attend our event tomorrow night. And my hope is that they'll see these brave performers on our stage and may be more willing to talk, maybe not on the stage, maybe to their neighbor or their friend, or seek treatment because of what they've witnessed. There is some evidence that supports the science behind storytelling as a tool for change. I'm not going to go into depth on this. It's not my area of expertise, the neurological basis here. But I find it fascinating, and I find it validating that, you know, I've helped to document that This Is My Brave is effective as a storytelling intervention. And here we can see what some of the mechanisms behind that might be. So Dr. Falk, who authored this op-ed, provides some really great articles that support the evidence base of storytelling. So this one, for example, I'll just share this one. I found this interesting. This was her work in her research lab. They stimulated areas of the brain that would block the ability to focus. And then they delivered messaging, either fact-based messaging or via a story. And what they found is the people who received the fact-based messaging were unable to articulate either an argument for or against the topic. I think the topic was something like cigarette smoking. Those who received the story, though, still, even though they had the same brain region stimulated, could articulate an argument for or against. And so what that means is, you know, we're all living in a very distracted world. We all have a lot of cognitive load and aren't able necessarily to process everything that we receive at a deep level. So if we can deliver messages through storytelling to all these busy people, they might be more able to process it. So the op-ed goes on to share various different research publications that provide evidence for this approach. So we are going to share with you this afternoon 3 storytelling interventions. We've mentioned This Is My Brave several times already. Shatterproof is here with us today and a sponsor of our show, so thank you very much for that. And then Kathy mentioned what we've called Brave Takes, which is a Photovoice intervention. My colleague, Dr. McGladrey, couldn't be here today, so I'm going to do my very best to articulate to you what she would have. So without further ado, I'd love for you all to hear from my colleague and friend, Erin Gallagher.
My name is Erin Gallagher, and I'm the Executive Director of This Is My Brave. And I'm happy to share with you today the story of This Is My Brave, our origins, and some of the work that we've been doing since we began nearly 10 years ago.
Now I say that it shouldn't have to be called brave to talk openly about it. Like, we should just be talking. We're never going to end the stigma around mental illness until we put our names and faces on our stories.
For a long time, I sort of suffered in silence. This series is trying to shine a light on these topics. There is no stigma to me. It's mine.
79 million people in the US live with mental illness, to be exact. Yet when mania slaps me in the face so hard that I am left trembling in a corner, unable to slow down the hundreds of thoughts buzzing behind my eyes, I do feel like the only person in the world at that moment. And I wonder, will it ever stop?
Jennifer Marshall wasn't always this brave. After experiencing back-to-back manic episodes in 2005, she was hospitalized and given a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. Not long after that, she began writing a blog to help process the pain she felt. So Jennifer, I'm psyched to have you on Mind Matters. Let me just start with about 10 years ago when you started your blog. Why did you want to start talking about your own sort of mental health?
I needed an outlet. I needed to go somewhere and write regularly about what I was going through. It just helped me process things.
When you started to talk about that on the blog, you did it anonymously. Why?
Because I was afraid of what people might think of me putting all that out there. I was a little bit fearful of being discriminated upon.
After a year and a half of blogging anonymously, Jennifer was offered an opportunity to write about her experiences for a major media outlet.
And it was at that moment where I'm like, do I want to just be a pen name or do I want to own this story? And this is me and I want to talk about it. Bipolar is a part of what makes up who I am.
Then, in 2013, she had a vision for staging a theatrical production where everyday people could tell their personal stories about mental health in front of a live audience. She decided to call it This Is My Brave. This Is My Brave. Where did that come from?
The Sarah Bareilles song Brave was super popular at the time, had just come out, hit top of the charts, you know, and I tweeted to her with my first public post and I said, Sarah, this is how big my brave is. And she retweeted me and I was like, oh my God, like, this is amazing.
Awesome. It is brave. It's so brave.
Well, the funny thing is now I say that it shouldn't have to be called brave to talk openly about it. Like, we should just be talking.
This Is My Brave staged their first storytelling event in 2014 in Arlington, Virginia.
A diagnosis is not a life sentence.
What was wrong with me was not a flaw in character, but in chemistry.
Since then, they've hosted 75 shows in 43 cities. And after that first show, what happened that made you go, okay, this was really good, I'm going to build on this?
This woman came up to me and she said, I found your blog in my darkest moment and your writing saved my life. And that's what the goal is to open up the conversation.
During the pandemic, This Is My Brave hosted 5 virtual events and launched a special series focused on teens. 18-year-old rapper Medarius Maximus will be performing in This Is My Brave's upcoming national teen show. You look like an artist, man. I mean, I'd sign you just like, you got like kind of like war. What's the deal with the war paint?
I was raised in Native American culture. I'm Puerto Rican and African American, so I put it on every day because I won. I won the battle of waking up.
Left wheelchair bound after a dirt bike accident when he was 14, Medarius has struggled off and on with depression.
I just wanted to do this to inspire people, show that if I can smile, then you can smile, because most people in my position, you either fall flat or you get back up and try to fight another day.
Jennifer has fought that same fight. In 2017, she had another manic episode following the sudden death of her creative partner and This Is My Brave co-founder, Anne-Marie Ames. This time, her kids were there to bear witness.
The trauma of seeing their mom sick affected them, and it came out in the form of anxiety for my daughter. We got her in with a private therapist, and she went through 5 months of therapy and wrote a book called My Mommy's Mental Illness.
That's a lot for young people to take in, but also part of what we're trying to do is create a new normal process. That's not special talk about mommy, that's just talk about mom.
It's life. I think every person on this planet is going to deal with some issue of their mental health at some time in their life.
Literally, when we hang up with this Zoom, like, I'll feel better. I don't even know you, but like, we're sort of like brother, sister in this thing together, and like, just talking makes you feel better.
Yeah.
So that was Jennifer Marshall, our co-founder, the very first executive director of This Is My Brave, and she stepped away from the organization at the end of 2021, and I stepped in 2022. So as you heard Jen in her piece say, the mission of This Is My Brave is to empower individuals to put their names and their faces to their personal stories of recovery from mental illness and substance use disorders, in order to break down stigma and let others know that they're not alone. And I think you just heard Jen say also her vision, our vision, is that one day we will live in a world where we won't have to call it brave to talk openly about what we're experiencing. We'll simply call it talking. How do we do what we do? We do it through live storytelling events that are held in communities across the country, like USF. This is a college edition of our show, but typically our shows are held in community theaters. We feature ordinary people sharing their extraordinary stories of overcoming. So these aren't actors. It's not a traveling troupe. I just saw Hamilton for the first time. I saw the Philip version of that show where the same troupe is going from city to city, but that's not what happens at This Is My Brave. Every single show is a unique production featuring local people. We don't want, actors swooping in and pretending. We don't want individuals coming in from another community. We want you to see people that represent your neighbors, your colleagues, your friends, your family on the stage. That's what has the power to break down the stigma. When we recognize the people around us from our community who are facing similar things to what we're experiencing. We also, have an emphasis on using the performing arts, and there's something very transformative about the arts in the way that they can represent these stories. Here's some pictures. That's from last year's show here at USF. Here's our playbill. You'll get one of those tomorrow night when you join us. This is the history of This Is My Brave. So Jen just told you, we saw in that piece that the very first show took place in 2014. You can see down in the lower right-hand corner there in Arlington, Virginia. And then that was met with such overwhelming success and response of just real praise and enthusiasm from the community. And I think she and her co-founder, Anne-Marie Ames, quickly realized that this is something that could be replicated in cities across the nation and to the same effect. And so they immediately turned around and started planning shows in other areas in 2015, 2016. As you can see, 2017 and 2018 were banner years. They extended a program into Australia. So that was an exciting time, but at the time there were 2 people on the team at This Is My Brave. So that was a challenging experience to pull off 20 shows with 2 people. So in 2019, you can see that it dialed back just a hair. But we also introduced at that time a pilot of the college edition and the high school edition. So we were very much aware of the impact that This Is My Brave has on cast members and communities. And we wanted to have that same impact on younger audiences. So that was the decision behind going into college edition and high school edition. We had big plans for those programs in the fall of 2019. And then spring of 2020 arrived and things fell apart for all of us. And we were kind of left scrambling. We had to shut down our spring productions just like everybody else. We thought, oh, we'll just do them in the fall. That didn't happen. Everything turned virtual. And we started to think about, like, are we using our time wisely? You know, we didn't want to waste the time that we had. We were off stage. We weren't doing what we usually do, which is just getting shows ready, getting communities ready to experience this show. So we really started thinking about what can we do with our time that will make this worthwhile, not wasted. So we thought about really trying to articulate what This Is My Brave, the program is, what our desired outcomes are for the participants, and what we can do, like, to really codify what happens in the Brave space that creates those outcomes. So the first thing we did, this is called our theory of change, by the way. So what we had to do is we had to do some interviews to speak with our storytellers, our past storytellers. We did over 100 interviews and asked them to really speak to us about what the Brave experience was like for them and what it meant for them in their lives, the impact that it had on them. And we listened very carefully to any themes that might emerge. And very quickly we were able to see that most of the people we spoke to, many of the people, I don't know that I have the numbers, so I don't want to say most, but many of the people repeated similar themes. And we boiled those down into what the outcomes are that we can expect to see of our program if it's executed properly. And those are these 5 here: a reduction in self-stigma and shame. These are all reported to us from storytellers. Increased sense of feeling valued, an increased sense of confidence, a strong sense of purpose, and a strong sense of community and support. So with that information and continuing to look at what people identified or answered in those questions, we wanted to think about what conditions are present in the Brave experience for storytellers and producers alike, for everybody that's a part of this. What has to be present to create these outcomes? We really want to make sure that when we're gathering people together, that we're doing it in the correct way. You know, we're doing it in a way that does optimize our chances to get to those outcomes. And so we developed our theory of change, which I'll show you in just a minute. But what we really discovered is that This Is My Brave is more than just a show. You know, we can't really focus on that final outcome. Tomorrow night, you're going to see a phenomenal event, but that's really the celebration of what's been going on for the past several months. And that's the work of This Is My Brave. That's what we are doing together with our storytellers and our production teams on the ground in communities around the country. So you can see from this image, you can also see my really bad editing because I just did some like coloring over to block what was there. So you can see my circles now. But in this image, you see an individual here on the left who's ready to tell their story. They arrive ready to tell their story of living with mental illness or addiction. And you can see out the other side, those are those outcomes we just talked about. So here we have in the middle, you know, we had to contemplate what's happening in that time together that would create those outcomes. And so this is what we came up with. During the time that producers and cast members are together, we want to make sure that they are experiencing social and psychological empowerment. So really their empowerment, I looked the word up when I was working on this, and it really means to give permission. And so if you can imagine, for many people with a stigmatized condition, that they're probably never, it's a rare occasion that they're invited to speak openly about that. In many cases, they're probably, even if they start to say something, you know, they get a hand like, oh, we're good, we don't need to talk about that. And here they are being invited. It's on a flyer that's in the student union or up in Starbucks, asking them to come forward and share their story of living with mental illness. And that really can be a very powerful and empowering experience for storytellers. The next pillar of our theory of change is reciprocity. So one thing that we need to be really careful of is we invite the production teams are together, they invite these storytellers in, and it really has to be a moment of reciprocity where the storyteller doesn't feel like they're being used for their story, that they feel like they're joining into something. So we really encourage our production teams when they're there doing the auditions to open up the conversation first by telling their why. We asked them to really be explicit about why they're passionate about doing this work and why they are excited to hear these individuals' stories. And so that sort of reciprocity sort of levels the playing field. There isn't a little power dynamic there. And that's really important to creating this safe space for storytellers. The next thing is affirmation. We want to really always be affirming of the story. So as people talk and share, we can verbally and non-verbally affirm them as they're sharing those stories. And that also then feeds into their sense of empowerment. In the course of all this, we're seeking to create authentic relationships. This isn't really, we're not just getting in, nose to the grindstone. We're here to talk about stories, just stories. I mean, we're building connections. We're having really powerful conversations. They've experienced that reciprocity and that affirmation. And through that, these authentic relationships form. And then throughout all of that, what we are doing is creating opportunities for transformation. And that transformation is personal transformation in terms of a person's growth and in their life and their journey with their recovery story. But I also like to highlight the opportunities for transformation for their story in particular. If you think about somebody who's getting ready to stand on stage and talk about their mental illness or their substance use disorder, this is something for them, in many cases, maybe shrouded in a lot of pain and shame. And when they are asked to create a piece, an artistic expression, a piece of artistic expression about that experience, it takes that thing that felt maybe bad or shameful to them, and it turns it into a piece of art that's going to be presented on a stage. I think that is an incredible transformation of the story. And then to stand on the stage and share that and then get a powerful reaction from the audience, you know, praise and applause, that's really incredible opportunity for transformation there as well. So what's next? Oh, you, Kristin. So one thing I just want to highlight is that we have This Is My Brave is a show, and I did just mention This Is My Brave is more than a show, it is a movement, but also with the help of Kristin and her team at the STAR Lab, we've been able to demonstrate that it is also a stigma reduction program. So with that, I'll let Kristin take it from here. Sure.
Okay. So you were introduced to Jennifer Marshall, the co-founder and former executive director of This Is My Brave, through her interview with Carson Daly. I remember her being like so excited about that interview. Jen reached out in 2015 to me seeking to develop an evidence base behind This Is My Brave's programming. And she was wise to do that because now This Is My Brave can cite this evidence that we've accumulated in any proposals that they put in for funding. So for me as a researcher, this is so fulfilling to know that the work that we've done together enables This Is My Brave, at least in part, to continue the amazing work that they're doing. So briefly, what this research has looked like, on the left-hand side was our first publication. Both are in the Community Mental Health Journal. Initially, we went into theaters with paper and pencil measures, and it was a pre-post design, so not the most rigorous research design, but we were just wanting to document some preliminary outcomes. So we asked people to complete a survey on one side before they watch the performance and then flip it over and do the other side afterwards. We then, on the right-hand side of the slide, took some recorded videos of This Is My Brave performances and put them up online and asked people to respond to the same types of survey items before and after watching them. And in this case, we were able to randomly assign people to either watch the This Is My Brave videos, watch a comparison condition, which was somebody telling their story without the creative expression component, and then watch a control video, which was, I think, a virtual reality TED Talk. Here's what we found. So the left-hand side is that first article, the pre-post in theater design. And all of these outcomes that you're seeing are significant. So we saw a significant reduction in stigma, a significant improvement in the belief among the audience that people with mental health conditions and addiction are capable of recovery. And then a significant increase in help seeking or willingness to seek help should you experience symptoms. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, in the online RCT that we conducted, we saw significant declines in desired social distance from people with mental illness from before to after watching the intervention video. The This Is My Brave and comparison condition both affected social distance. Social distance is a proxy of discrimination. So the greater desired social distance you have from somebody living with a mental health condition, the more likely you would be to discriminate against them. So this is a good outcome. And then what drives stigma and discrimination is perceived difference, the star bellies, right? The more we perceive somebody to be different from ourselves, the more possibility that opens up for us to stigmatize them or discriminate against them. So a significant reduction in perceived distance is a great thing. And we only found that with the This Is My Brave condition. So it was only through those creative stories that we saw a perceived difference decline. We've also begun accumulating evidence about the impact of telling your story on a Brave stage on the cast members. And when I say begun, it's because a Brave cast is typically comprised of 8 to 10 storytellers. So for those researchers in the audience, it's not a very large sample size. And so we've had to collect this data over the course of time. And I think we're getting very close to having 12-month follow-up data on a big enough sample to be able to actually look at this in a rigorous way. But what we have seen preliminarily from this data is that Brave storytellers experience an increased sense of empowerment, one of the things that Erin was talking to you about earlier, an increased sense of self-esteem and self-efficacy, and an increased sense of optimism. Finally, I wanted to share with you that we have done some work targeting This Is My Brave's, This Is My Brave as an intervention. And this is an article that I published quite a while ago that talks about the importance of targeting stigma change. It's called the TLC4 model. We don't have to go really detailed into this, but I'll just say that that it's important, as Erin mentioned to you, that these stories be delivered through contact, through storytelling, by a credible individual. And the more you see yourselves sharing commonalities with an individual, the more credible you will find them to be. So stories from your own community. And community can mean lots of things. It can mean physical location, right? But it can also mean cultural communities. So my colleague, Dr. Kaya Connor, and I received a grant from USF's Understanding Blackness and Anti-Black Racism initiative. And Kaya and Dr. Tanisha Freeman Foster and other colleagues did a really wonderful job putting on a virtual Stories from the Black Community show. This one was virtual because it was happening during COVID. What we found is a decreased personal stigma and perceived stigma among people who watched the show, and then an increase in beneficial attitudes towards treatment seeking and anti-racism. And the asterisks that you're seeing indicate a significant interaction. So BIPOC audience members, people who identified as Black, Indigenous, people of color, had a significantly greater decrease in personal stigma and perceived stigma, and a significantly greater increase in beneficial attitudes towards treatment seeking than those who did not identify as members of the BIPOC community. This has just recently been published in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease. And then another example, virtual again, was stories from the APITA community. One of my graduate students, now Dr. Jenny Tran, conducted research to document outcomes here and found, as you're seeing, very similar outcomes. Though we didn't see difference in this case between people who identified as being APITA community members versus those who didn't. There's a high school edition show. And as you know, there's a college edition show. So if you were interested in seeing our video from last year, one of the things This Is My Brave does is requires that their production teams capture the show using professional videography. which is great because what this allows for is there's an entire catalog of not every, but nearly every storyteller's story that ever has been told on the This Is My Brave YouTube channel, linked from their website. So one of the things that we've talked about is finding ways to channel people online to the stories that they might most benefit from. And then finally, this you can absolutely scan, please do if you haven't already. This is tomorrow evening's production of the show. On these flyers are cast members from our 2022 show. And so join us at 7 p.m. in USF's concert hall. Admission is free. Wait until I see the cameras go down. I don't want to interrupt people. There we go. Okay, quickly gonna talk about Dr. McGladrey's work on Brave Takes. So Margaret and I were awarded a grant from the College of Behavioral and Community Sciences. So here's acknowledging that through the internal grant program to evaluate not only This Is My Brave, but an accompanying storytelling intervention called Photovoice. I am probably not going to do this as well as Margaret would, but I will do my best. So this is not a new intervention. This is 30 years old. And the goal of this intervention or this participatory action research method is to record and reflect community strengths and concerns and to promote dialogue and knowledge about important issues through large and small group discussions and photographs. It is also used to reach decision makers, and you'll see what I mean in a moment. We're creating artifacts that can then be circulated in different settings to reach different audiences, including, most importantly, people who are making policy decisions. So it has been used and confirmed to be effective for destigmatizing mental health conditions among college students. There's research that suggests that disclosure of mental health challenges and recovery stories by faculty can have a very powerful impact on the student body. I serve on USF's Presidential Advisory Committee on Accessibility, which is basically a committee dedicated to ensuring inclusion of people with disabilities on our campuses. And I hear in conversation all the time that students are hungry for mentors and role models that they know have shared a lived experience with them. But because of stigma, oftentimes faculty and staff are very hesitant to disclose experiences with mental health conditions because, let's face it, there are risks around that. So we have called Photovoice anonymous broadcasting, and this is based on this work that was done in 1993 by Herman, looking at how people manage their ex-psychiatric patient identities. And there's different approaches that people can use, including they can avoid people altogether, which is social avoidance. They can keep their illness a secret and do a lot of work to try to manage who knows and who doesn't know. They can selectively disclose to certain people that they think will be safe with that information. They can choose to just disclose to whoever is around, whoever asks, or they can broadcast. And what This Is My Brave cast members are doing is broadcasting. We wanted to provide an opportunity for people to be off the stage storytellers. So what that means is being empowered by being able to share their story, but having a choice over whether they put their name to that story. Interestingly, I think what we found, and I may be misspeaking here, but I don't think I am, is that most of our Photovoice storytellers do want to associate their name with their photo and narrative. So this is the process they go through. They have an orientation. They take photos based on a theme. So the themes that were discussed for this year were what supports your mental health on campus and what might be a hindrance to your mental health. They have discussions in their groups about their photographs. They decide which ones are most powerful and they assign like a written narrative to them. And then they plan for action so that we haven't gotten to that step yet. In fact, next week the show will be over. The production team will have a lot more time on their hands. And we'll be planning for how we can make this photo exhibit a traveling exhibit. Where do the photographers want to see it displayed on campus? So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but these are examples of the photographs that have been taken by some of these groups. This is a faculty and staff group. You can see that there's a quotation provided next to each photo. And similarly, we had a staff group that took photos and created narratives, and a student group that did the same thing. And so this is what it ends up looking like when it's actually, I just got an email, I got to go to ProCopy later on and pick these up. But these are posters on the left-hand side here that will be in this display on in the lobby of the concert hall tomorrow evening. And then also, I think this is really cool, they produce postcards that you can either keep or you can send to somebody else and maybe share what you found powerful about it. So that's Photovoice. Our research around this is hoping to document the individual effects of This Is My Brave and Photovoice as storytelling tools, and then also the additive effects. So for those who experience both, do they experience greater reduction in stigma? With that, I would love to introduce to you Courtney McKeon from Shatterproof.
Thank you. So happy to be here today with you all. My name is Courtney McKeon. I'm the Vice President of the National Stigma Initiative at Shatterproof. Shatterproof is a national nonprofit working to reverse the addiction crisis. In 2013, our founder and CEO tragically lost his son to substance use disorder. From that, Shatterproof was born. He identified 3 priority pillars of work: supporting and empowering our communities, revolutionizing the treatment system, which my colleague Michelle will talk about in a little bit, and breaking down the addiction-related stigma. So in 2019, when the National Stigma Initiative was formed, we underwent an exhaustive research process for 12 months with an external consultant to really understand how other social change movements have effectively reduced stigma. We looked at HIV/AIDS, cancer, same-sex marriage. We did that through looking at over publications, expert interviews, and what we found was that there was a lot of core tenets or evidence there that we could use and translate to reduce the stigma of addiction. So what we came up with was this framework, and I'm so glad that Kristin and Erin went before me because it's a lot of the same evidence base that we're using in the work that we're doing. So our bread and butter of our campaigns, these are digital media campaigns, right? But what we do is we structure them as public health interventions. We move past impressions and towards impact. So we use evidence-based content, which is our contact-based strategy, which we talked about earlier, right? How do we bridge the gap between someone who has a stigmatizing condition and the person who holds that stigmatizing views? So in our case, someone who has substance use disorder, how do we show that substance use disorder does not discriminate and that there aren't differences, there's commonalities between the person who has the disorder and the person who doesn't? So our first campaign that we launched was in Pennsylvania in 2020, and we collected over 200 stories. So unlike your regular digital media campaigns, right, they have 1, 2, maybe 3 stories. That doesn't represent the diversity of a community or a state. So we collect as many stories as possible. We then put these stories out through our priority channels. So we've really leveraged community-based organizations to be trusted messengers in their communities. So we give them content to share out, resources, we build technical assistance with them through webinars and teaching them why words matter and how to change their language around substance use disorder. We also use community-based organizations in order to scale the campaign at an affordable rate and also create sustainability for when Shatterproof is no longer in a state. Then moving to our second priority channel, we use digital influencers. So we look at Instagram influencers, and they might be someone who has 100 followers or someone who has 50,000 followers. We use them to raise awareness of our campaigns, to push out stories, our evidence-based content, and to also encourage them to share their stories with their engaged following count. So they act as trusted messengers to their followership. And then we have targeted paid media. So because we look at our campaigns as public health interventions, we start every campaign with 4 months of formative research. In that formative research phase, we do a evaluation, which I'll talk about the evaluation a little bit later. But that evaluation really curates what our targeted paid media strategy looks like. So for example, in Pennsylvania, we saw that Black Philadelphians held more stigma towards medication for opioid use disorder. They thought it was trading one drug for another. They thought that it wasn't effective. So what we do is we make sure that the stories that we're pushing out in Philadelphia are around medication for opioid use disorder. How can we put out the narrative or the knowledge that's needed where the stigma is showing up? They're a lot more sophisticated than that, but that is not my expertise. I have a wonderful colleague who helps with that strategy. I wanted to just take a quick screen grab. This is our Unshamed Kentucky campaign. We just started went into our second year in March. So you'll see on the left-hand side, this is just like our Instagram. You'll see some photo stories, which are where you see someone's picture and a quote. You'll see some educational based content, and then we have our stories. And can we play the video, please?
I'm Jason. I live in Campbellsville, Kentucky, and I've been in Gallagher for years.
So to produce a story like Jason's, we sit down for about 45 minutes with a person who comes forward through their community-based organizations usually, and we just talk. We just have an open discussion. We have a framework of questions that we ask, but we then drill it down to about 1 minute to 2 minutes because that's what's digestible on social media, right? But we still have 40-some minutes of footage, right? So we go back and we look, there's multiple storylines, multiple pieces of evidence-based content that we can get from that. And again, on the back end, we will retarget people. So connecting our story to the same person over and over again. But what we'll do is we will take them through a curriculum. So we'll start with maybe a 15 seconds clip of Jason, get someone acquainted to him, and then we'll take them through a journey, and then also throw in some educational posting. So that's just a little flavor of like what the campaigns look like. So as I spoke about earlier, our campaign, you can't really see the other slot from here. Sorry, the bar graph's a little light, but our campaign's wrapped around an evaluation. So we do one at the beginning, and then we do one at 12 months to see, are we moving past impressions towards impact? So in Kentucky, we saw some promising trends. We were able to reach 16% of the population. Again, this is on a shoestring budget as well, that were aware of the Unshamed Kentucky campaign. We also saw some statistically significant differences when asked people who were aware of the campaign how willing they would be to hire someone to do work with them with a substance use disorder. They were 39% more willing, or people who were not campaign aware reported that they were 22% willing to hire somebody. So we're quickly expanding our reach. We started in Pennsylvania in 2020. We went to Kentucky in 2022. And then we just launched campaign in California in March. We're launching one in Georgia in May. So back to the evaluation tool that we use. In 2021, we worked with Indiana University to really come up with what we call the Shatterproof Addiction Stigma Index, which is the most comprehensive tool used to measure the stigma of addiction of the general public. So it was over 50 validated questions, and we were able to reach close to 8,000 US residents. It was a representative sample of the United States. Some themes that came out of that were that we saw in specific areas that healthcare providers actually held more stigma than the general public. So you'll see here, 65% of healthcare providers falsely believe that substance use disorder is not a chronic disease, and 45% of healthcare professionals endorse that harmful belief that MOUD, medication for opioid use disorder, is substituting one drug for another. So this really impedes patient outcomes. So with that, we moved into a second system. So our first system is our community-based system working on the general public stigma. This is our healthcare segment that we just kicked off last year. So the first bullet, we started a pilot with Penn State University. So we're working in Pennsylvania hospitals to really do a feasibility study to see what is the most effective delivery method of education for healthcare professionals to increase their knowledge of substance use disorder and then also reduce stigma. And then last year, we were honored with a 3-year grant from Elevance Health Foundation. We are working to put together a curriculum to reduce the stigma and increase referrals to treatment of healthcare professionals who are primarily serving Hispanic Latinx communities. So that will go live later this year. And with that, I'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to Michelle to talk about Atlas.
It is now official evening because it's 5 o'clock. So good evening, and I tend to move around, and I promise I will make it quick, but to the point, because I want to be cognizant and respectful of people's time. So the one thing, what I love about everything I've heard thus far in terms of the stigma and how it really ties in with Atlas is really just so important. I've been one of the big people, well, I won't say big people because I'm short, but one of the individuals really pushing for the stigma team being here in Florida, because there's so much stigma tied to addiction and even co-occurring disorders, because oftentimes if someone has SUD, there are co-occurring disorders attached to that. I often share, even for me, my own personal story with my family. My background is nonprofit. I am coming from an FQHC where I was doing healthcare lobbying work. So I have seen all of the healthcare workers who don't think it's an issue to those who do, but even the stigma that comes along with it. Growing up, my uncle had a severe drug problem. I mean, he's been in and out of jail my entire life. And he is definitely in his 70s now, and we are still dealing with ongoing incarceration behind his addiction. Growing up, the stigma in African American community is only rich people and rich Caucasian people go to treatment. We don't do that. We don't talk about it, and you go to church and pray about it. And that's going to solve it. That makes everything better. And I'm a firm believer there's nothing wrong with prayer and a therapist. But for my uncle, he's the running joke, and it's a really bad joke in our family, is if he's in jail, he's gone home. If he's out of jail, he's on vacation. And unfortunately, having this ongoing addiction, unfortunately, now some of his children have followed in that same path, who are also struggling with addiction. You either have those who drew that line that I will not do this because I've seen what it's done to my family member or my father, or they follow right in that path. So there's so much work to be done behind stigma and the addiction of it. You know, addiction is no longer the face of 48 hours, which I'm completely obsessed with, and all the crime shows. It's actually now, which is funny for me, all the health care workers who don't think it's a problem, because a lot of them are your SUD users, and especially coming after COVID. And I worked in healthcare. I was at an FQHC where we were short-staffed. In a million years, no one would have made me believe as a healthcare lobbyist, I would be in full PPE at COVID testing sites helping, because there were no staff. But that's what we were doing. And for so many to cope, it went to drugs or it went to alcohol. because that's the one stock that didn't lose value during the pandemic was alcohol. I mean, they definitely made their money. So there's so much behind that. So I definitely appreciate the work that I've listened to, and probably everyone that's in this room right now, the work that they're doing, not only with stigma, but that is impacting somehow SUD or even co-occurring disorders. Uh-oh. Me and technology, I'm telling you. Okay, here we go. Our vision, definitely as Courtney has shared, when it comes to Atlas, is our vision is no one is going to suffer or die from substance use disorder, a disease that is both preventable and treatable. And a lot of that, again, for me, is the treatable aspect, is where I work for in Atlas. And our mission is to provide trusted guidance through the complexities of substance use disorders and to remove the systemic healthcare and social barriers to strong recovery. One of the biggest things that happens is access and information, because so many people don't know what's out there, and so much of the predatory ads that because everyone Googles everything. I mean, I Google everything, but not everyone digs a little deeper to make sure it's factual. And there are so many ads that come up. A brief story I'll share is I do have a lot of conversations with law enforcement, and not because I'm in trouble, but because of the work that I'm doing. And down south, there is a gentleman who they can't seem to arrest him or shut down what he's doing because he walks that line of predatory services. A lot of people who are in trouble with law enforcement are required to do workshops or trainings. They go to, his ad comes up, he's inexpensive, I can pay you, I can go to this, and they show up to court and they turn in this paperwork, and the court is like, what do you want me to do with this? They are not licensed, they're not required, but nowhere has he said he is licensed. What someone saw is this was inexpensive, I can afford to do this. So a lot of it becomes information, and that's one of the things that we're definitely working towards. So within the Atlas tool, we have our national principles of care, and a lot of it, I don't want to read to everyone who's capable of reading, because I mean, there are all these doctors, all these PhDs in here, and I'm just Michelle. So again, it's a lot of the misinformation, limited objective and unbiased information, unclear what to look for. But as I think about it, we didn't know where to look for my uncle for care. Just had no clue where to start. And I really wish the Atlas tool had been available years before I discovered it, or 10 years ago, or even 20 years ago, because I think about how it could have changed his life and the life of his family. And for me, I think about being in an FQHC and the number of patients that we saw come through our doors. At an FQHC, we're very limited. We had no idea where to send someone to who came in who really needed SUD services. So Atlas is a one-of-a-kind resource. And I always like to share, it's free. And everyone loves free. It's free for providers, and it's free for anyone who is seeking treatment. So one of the challenges I have right now in the state of Florida, there are well over 1,000 providers of SUD services. Right now, I have only had 341 providers complete the survey. And I can speak because there's a provider in the room who's actually done the survey. And I'm gonna actually walk through the tool, so I'm gonna probably have you access the internet for me if you don't mind. I'd really appreciate you so much. So right now, this is we are live in 14 states, and we are steadily growing. The website's going to be treatmentatlas.org. And one thing that's great is, so if you're looking, let me just say, if you're going to be looking for treatment in the state of Florida, you will find that wherever you're at, if you actually go on your phones right now, because everyone has a smartphone, treatmentatlas.org. Once you get, thank you, you're just amazing. You can either type in your zip code within a mile radius, or you have the option of taking the assessment. The website itself right now, I'm really excited because we are relaunching it, and it will be changing. And as it changes, one of the things I'm loving is going to be more people facing and more people first. and I really love people first language. And for me, this is very sterile and very medical, and you want it to be very welcoming. So on the new site, there'll be videos of people sharing how long they've been in treatment, that they are in treatment, that, you know, there is a tomorrow, there is help, come seek treatment. So if you don't mind, would you click take assessment, or can I ask it from here? Because what you see, I don't see on here. Oh. Well, this is going to be challenging. Okay. Got it. So right now it says you'll have 13 questions. With the new website, we're going to 10. And let's be honest, you bought something at a store, you get a survey, and they want you to take questions. I'm diagnosing myself. I feel I have adult ADHD. Once I get to probably question number 7, I'm over it. I'm not doing it. This is too much. So that's why we're taking it down to 10. So. Oh, here we are, because I can't see. I'm going to take this for myself. And what I like is with the new one, it's just going to be a box. Check the box. And especially here, because it'll say substances, and there's this huge drop down. For someone, I feel like, who is wanting to seek treatment, or if you're taking the assessment because you're trying to find treatment for someone else, this is already sensory overload. It's already, oh my God, there's all these drugs, or there's all this. It's finger pointing at me, or you just don't know. It's just going to be boxes, and you can just pick a box, or there'll be that line and you can just type it in, versus having to scroll down and figure out what is the substance you're going to check for. Because unfortunately, fentanyl is taking over Florida right now. Are you able to stop using? I'm not going to check that one. We'll go with, I don't think I have any withdrawal. I don't have any medical problems. And it'll ask this because there, you know, definitely when we're going to refer you to what you should look at, that's information that we want to make sure we're pulling as your recommendations come up. Think about troubles you might have. And again, this is why I'm going to love all of the boxes with the new survey, just to get through this so we can get to the site. I'm going to pick that. I'm willing to try any treatment. I don't have any requirements. Oh, that's something here. I literally, this is definitely unique to do it this way. Okay. And you're right, the light, I'm like, I can't see where the next box is. There we go. Oh, perfect. So this is what it is now recommending for me. So in taking that assessment, it will provide recommendations of the type of treatment you should seek. And I can type, find treatment now. Want to pick a zip code? I have no idea what zip codes are here. 33620. Okay, but you said 33. Oh, wait a minute. See, this is, okay, there we go. 3362. Still not typing. Okay, all right. And we're gonna do a 25-mile radius and submit. And this is what will automatically come up. Now, if I uncheck this box, what will also come up is every single provider that has not completed their survey. But with this box check, what will only be up is those who have completed their survey. Now, with the new revamped website, they will just be at the very end. You won't have to worry about unchecking a box. They will be at the very, very bottom of the list of who is complete or not completed. But what is great about this tool, and what I find to be so beneficial for someone seeking treatment, is you can filter out additional items. Like you can have payment options, whether you're cash or self-payment or you need sliding scale. in the update, we're really addressing, because a lot of people are like, well, I don't have insurance. And we've had medical providers say that, and they don't understand that necessarily that's what sliding fee scale is, or cash and self-payment. So we want to make sure we're kind of addressing some of those questions. If you have insurance, you're able to go ahead and go in here and pick your insurance company, so it'll filter out specifically. Are you looking for same-day walk-in, accepted individual counseling? Are you also looking for healthcare on site? Because so often they haven't been to the doctor. And that's what I'm finding in a lot of minority communities, where I'm talking to recovery groups or I'm going out to community groups. A lot of people have not been to the doctor, specifically, in minority communities, African American, the Haitian community, Hispanic community, and everybody has their relatives who's in their 50s, 60s, 70s. Oh, I haven't been to the doctor in 20 years. I'm healthy as a horse. And then you find out the horse probably should be put out to the pasture and shot, because there's so many things that are wrong. So that is why we all want to put that as an option. The medication, if there's a certain medication you're really wanting to utilize as you're in treatment. Medications for alcohol use disorder. If you need additional languages speak, and the website will go from English to Spanish. One of the things we don't have specifically for Florida is for the website itself to translate to Haitian Creole. So a lot of our collateral materials we are now providing in French Creole. Again, it can break down for age requirements, pregnant, postpartum, click more, literally goes down to homelessness, LGBTQ plus welcoming. So let's pick to compare. You can select up to 3 facilities, and that is because if you are on a cell phone, you want to be able to see what you're comparing, and a cell phone will only do up to 3. I'm just randomly picking. So we can now go to compare. So now you're able to compare apples to apples and not apples to bananas. They're right next to one another. You're able to see the types of services offered, what they focus on, age-specific programming available, the payment options, but this is where it becomes more important when you're talking about the signs of high-quality care, and you're able to actually see what services they truly provide. And this is why it's so important to have these providers complete the survey, but so you know exactly what it is a provider does. So as you can see here, this facility doesn't offer outpatient services until residential treatment is available. So they don't do that. This one's, they don't provide this at all. Mm-hmm. You can click down further and see what they have as part of the personalized evaluation and treatment plan. You can see if they have medications on site, whether it's not offered. And as you can see here, because this site has a different location they can send you to, you can get an injection at a different site, but at that current site, they don't offer it. So being able to see what a provider does is literally that sign of high quality treatment. And it is really why I go out, I push this to providers and encourage them. And a lot of providers are really supporting our efforts. And I hate to put Ashley Neal on the spot, but as she represents a provider, she can literally speak to that in terms of the importance of doing it. But also when I say that providers who believe in this tool and are also willing to encourage other providers to complete it. DCF is our partner. They are our funder for this. So it is, again, free. And DCF has also sent out emails to providers. They say, although it is not mandated, we strongly encourage you to complete the survey. And I really feel as it moves forward and we're more successful in getting providers engaged, this is probably in the state of Florida going to be part of that licensing process. They're going to really start evaluating who is doing it. There are a lot of conversations with DCF right now, wanting even us to look at how else can we expand the Atlas tool. And those of us who've done any work with DCF means they're going to really try to see how else they can benefit from it. And a lot of people ask, well, there's SAMHSA. SAMHSA is great and it's out there, but you're not going to be able to drill down and get this level of information. And what's been great about this tool is I received feedback from a provider that there was a family moving from North Carolina. They were leaving the state because they wanted to get their child from the environment they were in, because that is where they were really using substance abuse. No matter what they did, no matter the interventions, they somehow were right back in that life. So they were like, we're leaving the state, and they decided to come to Florida, but their son was in treatment. So their concern was, how do we not miss that step in his treatment? They were actually able to use this tool to find a facility where they were moving to, so the son continued to have that continuum of care. So the tool works. Of course, I tell everybody it only works for states that we are live in. We're currently expanding to 3 additional states, and with that expansion, I think the statistics, please don't quote me, it'll put us at least servicing, I believe it's going to be 36% of the US population. Clearly the goal is to be in every state. That is what we're working towards and what I hope will happen. Because again, I see that with my healthcare background coming from an FQHC, I see how this benefits. I sent this to my old job. I've sent it to all FQHCs because it really is about access and giving people the resources that they need to get help. And not only giving them the resources, but giving them access to quality information so that they're not being Google added to death or dealing with predatory, I was gonna say predatory lending, but predatory service providers, because it is definitely out there. We see it. We don't want to send someone to a semi-legal pill mill, because the reality is they exist. And this is why, because I always say to a provider, if you haven't filled it out, why? It's free. If your job and your mission truly is to serve the community and address addiction, why would you not fill it out? So for us right now, Florida is getting ready to go back into what we call our open enrollment. And this is the opportunity for providers to complete the survey. And I'm very transparent. The survey is long. It can really, you weren't supposed to co-sign right then. It can take anything from 15 minutes to 2 hours, but you don't have to do it in one setting. You can start, come back, it'll still be there. But when that window closes and it's not done, then you'll be listed on our website, but you'll be listed with no information. So we're getting ready to enter into the last open enrollment of 2023 for Florida, which is going to be May and June of this year. So after this, no one will be able to fill out their survey again until next year. So we're definitely encouraging providers to complete the survey. For me, I'm thankful to be on the campus of USF. Myself and my program coordinator who's in South Florida, one of the things that we want to do is come onto campuses and not necessarily presenting to the staff, but present to the students. Because so often they know someone who needs help and they don't know where to go and where to start. One of the other things that we provide as part of the Atlas tool is we have what we call a patient experience survey. So if you've ever been to treatment and you didn't feel like you had that voice to share, like, you know what, they were phenomenal, or maybe they weren't so great and they could do this to improve their services, you can go on, even go right on the Atlas, click a provider, and you can fill out a survey for them. Now, what I will say, we will post everyone's survey, but we will not post it if it has profanity. We will not post it if it has someone else's personal information. So you can't go on there and Dr. Smith sucks, this is he was this, we're not going to put that on there. And we also have a team that reads every single survey, bless them. Because you do have providers who have completed surveys. So we'll go on the back end, look at the IP addresses. I don't know anyone who goes somewhere and they can recite everyone's mission and value statement down to the wire. But this is, you've had providers go fill out the survey and they're putting like, yeah, no. Mm-hmm. So we will flag those. But on the other side, for every provider that fills out a survey, they have access to a password protected portal. They can go in and see surveys, because we won't post it until we at least have 20. Because no one wants one survey that says they're amazing and, maybe they're not, but you want to make sure it's really valid. It's not, so that's what we said, we don't want it to be like Yelp. But you can, for that provider, they can go in and see how they compare to someone else throughout the state. What are best practices? We have CPY workshops, we have provider roundtables. So the goal is for us all to continue to work together to have best practices. So that I'm really excited about the PES process, patient experience survey. So the goal is, again, share information to make sure there's absolute access for everyone. So with schools, so I say that again, at USF, if there's ever desire and need for us to come and present to students, because so often they don't know where to go, and it might not be for them. It may be for a friend, it may be for a family member, but sometimes it's just having the resource and the access of information. People who know me from my background when I was working with FQHCs, one of my biggest, and this is what I feel personally, healthcare is a right and not a privilege. It doesn't matter what aspect of care, whether it's stigma, whether it's mental illness, SUD, it's a right. And I want to make sure everyone has access to the information to have that right to get the care and convenience. Are there any questions for me? Oh, come on, it's gotta be one.
Well, I was going to say, actually, this is great, but it's only as good as the provider that's filling out the information.
Correct.
Do you go back in if there's questions that you have for the provider? Will you go back in and ask to validate or update or clarify?
Well, we validate everything. So understand, and I'm sure Ashley could speak to it if if you want a provider perspective. Not that I'm asking you to speak, but in here, when they fill it out, they're uploading care plans. We're checking license number. And keep in mind, the provider list that we're receiving is coming from DCF. So it's not like we're randomly pulling this. This is being provided to us by DCF. So everyone that's on here, they're licensed. But they have to upload an example of a treatment plan, their clinical nurses are a part of this, their operation officer. And once it's done, their CEO or whoever is that person has to go in and attest to that information. Then on the back end, before we put everyone live, we attest to make sure we don't have any questions, that we need to go back to this provider and ask for clarification or ask for additional information, or we see maybe that, and then the way the system is set up, you can't skip a question unless it's a service you don't provide. It won't let you move forward. So there is a lot of dialogue often between the provider and us as they're doing this survey. Yes, sir.
How do you decide which states you're going to go to next? Is it based on population?
It is honestly based on funding. So the goal, and that is why for providers it's free, because we don't want to get into that pay to play. Because I have had providers that I've presented to, like, you should do this, and like, okay, so what do I have to do to make sure you refer everyone to us? That's not how that works. I was like, that's not how that works. It's not how it works. But it's a state provider. So DCF is who funds Atlas in Florida. So it really is funding. In some states, there are foundations that are funding it. So that is honestly a lot of the decision making behind it, is having conversations with states to see who will fund it. But we have entered in states without a funder. We've raised the money where we see that there's really a huge need.
I would just like to add is when Michelle said it was very in-depth, it is very in-depth. And if you know treatment provider, my recommendation is that someone clinical fills out the survey. I've worked at Turning Point for 11 years. I also went to treatment there, so I have a lot of perspectives on Turning Point, and I thought I could answer the questions, but as we went through, I sent my CEO, who's our clinical director as well, an email. It's like, I knew you wanted me to do this, but you got to do it, because I didn't want it to be, not great information. I'm not going to call anyone out on this screen, but I'm thinking I can tell who took 15 minutes and who took the 2 hours when they filled it out, because I know some of these programs, and some of them didn't give themselves a good enough credit for the services they provide.
Well, oh, so sorry for them. But again, it is the access of information. You want people, and I think a lot of that is because what I'm hearing, and I recognize it is true, there's such a staff shortage right now at these facilities. Like, there's one provider that this last enrollment, she was like, I'm doing the best as I can. She's like, I literally don't have any staff. So can you work with me to give me time to get this done? So one of the things, there are providers that have multiple sites. If their sites provide the same treatment, we'll just do a data transfer. So they don't have to complete this over and over again for the same site multiple times. So we really do a lot of work to try to make it to streamline the process for them. Yes, sir.
How did you get the universe of interventions or all the different types of services to list on there?
Well, you mean for this? Well, they worked with, in terms of Atlas, they worked with a lot of professional AMSA, SAMHSA, every acronym you can think of has played a role. So we didn't make this up ourselves. We really wanted it to be validated measures as well as a validated tool on how you fill this out. Any additional questions for me? I do have brochures I'm happy to give out. I have in English and Spanish, and I even brought my French Creole card. If he went to, I'm sorry, if you go back to her, I'll put up my contact information. What I realized is I didn't, I was in Tallahassee Tuesday presenting, and I realized I don't have any more business cards in my bag. So let me, wait a minute. I clicked something bad, I'm sorry. There we go. So there's my contact information. Should take a picture. Honestly, feel free to email me any questions. Yeah, I would say if I don't have the answer, I will get the answer for you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all for sharing all of this great information this afternoon. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our Dean of College of Community Sciences. It's going to say a few words.
Thank you. I really want to thank our presenters today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming. The work that you're doing is extremely important. And I am so impressed that you reached out to the Academy to help you, and that's really what we're here for, is to provide that research support for you to be able to help you say, this works, or this doesn't work. And I think, so thank you for reaching out. I don't care if it's Indiana, thank you, USF. But anywhere, just to get that support is extremely important. It's really very thoughtful, and I appreciate it, because there's so many programs out there, there is no evidence base behind it. And so people get misled. Everyone says this is great, this works, and you say, well, where's the evidence? And it just doesn't exist. So thank you for being the foresight to do that. So this is a FMHI co-sponsored event, and I'm very grateful for this kind of event before tomorrow. So I would say that if you weren't there last year, you're in for a treat if you're going tomorrow. It's really quite the event. But at the FMHI events, we've been thanking people that have been donors to the college and to FMHI in particular. So today, we'd like to thank two of our donors that have been long-standing supporters of both the college and the FMHI. They've given not just of their treasure, but they've given their time, they've given their advice. They're still there, even for me, I know they are. And so, and for the faculty, they've had such an impact on this college. So, Ray Armstrong, Dr. Boothroyd, if you would come up, please. This way is more than merry. Yes. No, thank you. And I was just wondering if you would just say a few words about that's a legacy gift, and yeah. You go ahead and just say a little bit about where you decided to donate and why.
Well, this is very easy for me because this event is why we decided, for me, this is the reason why we made the legacy gift. So one of the legacy gifts that we have done is to support the executive director of the Louis Della Part Florida Mental Health Institute position. Our goal is to make it fully funded. Julie's been just wonderful in supporting FMHI, but in the future, I really want to make sure that this work, the work that Kristin is doing, and all of our colleagues continues. And so that's one of the gifts that we are doing. And this is tonight, this is the reason why.
The other gift that we're donating to is the Moms Project Scholarship Fund. And that really came out of, I think, a confluence of a couple things. Many years ago, Paul Stiles and myself and Catherine Batch applied for some funding for a summer research institute. And I think out of that came some tremendous work from students in terms of the work that they can do at the undergraduate level in terms of research in mental health and addictions. And the second piece of that was, at that time, my mom and Mary's mom were living with us, and Catherine's mom had moved to Florida, and we used to do a lot of things together, go to women's basketball games together, go out to dinner, and Catherine would say, well, let's take the moms here, and let's take the moms here. And one of the things that I give Catherine credit for the original idea, we talked about, wouldn't it be great to have scholarship funding for undergraduates in our college to do research? And so we created the Moms Project. And it's grown. A lot of people have contributed to it. There's an honor roll. In fact, Monday is the luncheon for the students who will be have received awards this year. And so we're very pleased to be able to contribute to that, and hopefully that will go on and get them on a path that not only helps themselves, I think, in undergraduate school, but can really help the field in terms of being invested in terms of research in mental health and addiction.
Thank you. Mary and Roger are very avid women's basketball fans, and so I'm arranging for some 2 courtside tickets for women's basketball game next year. We'll have to see, when the season gets closer, I'm going to have you just give me a list of the ones you'd like to go to, and I'm going to secure 2 tickets for you.
Thank you very much.
This is a small token, so, but thank you. So now on the quest for next year. So now I got to find a donor to bring up here next year. So if I call you and ask you for lunch, please grab your assets. Because I'm going to be asking for them. So did you want to wrap this up, or is this?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all so much. I know, again, I said in the beginning, we're trying to get back to our in-person events, and we have one today, we have one tomorrow, we have one Monday, so we're getting there, and we really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon. I know it's 5:30, so again, thank you all for being here. Some of our speakers will stick around if there's questions, but again, have a great night, and hopefully we'll see most of you tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock at the museum. Thank you.
Thank you.